Welcome to Current Conversations, the podcast where the pool deck meets real life. I'm Aubrey Bowles, a former Nova of Virginia and Villanova swimmer, joined by Jeff Brown, the coach who pushed me through every lap, and together we dive beneath the surface of the sport we both love. Each episode, we sit down with guests from across the swimming world, athletes, coaches, and trailblazers, to relive the moments that shaped them, the lesson learned between the lanes, and the memories that stick long after the water dries. Whether you grew up chasing the black line or you simply love a good story, you're in the right lane. Let's dive in. Our guest on this episode is a data specialist and is the creator of SwimIntel and the SwimIntel Spotlight podcast, advancing the world of swimming daily. Benji, I know you know this guest more than Jeff and I do, so is there anything else you'd like to say about him before we get started?
Yeah, man, I will just kind of give you my quick backstory. I met Jamie as the father of one of my swimmers. And when I met his daughter, she was just a recent convert from gymnastics. And Jamie knew very little about swimming, but was always asking, always kind of striving. And then when his daughter became, a junior in high school, he started going through the recruiting process. And he would kind of call me and said, man, there has got to be a better way. And I remember him saying, how do I know which team's going to get my daughter faster? And, I said to him what turned out to be dead wrong. I said, well, Jamie, realistically, that's hard to measure because the teams that start with the lowest level talent, naturally, their progression is going to look the most staggering. And he's thought about it and he came back and said, hey, check out Virginia. And that kind of like blew me away. But since then, he has started this incredible project that we have this relationship now where he'll call me and say, hey, I got an idea. What do you think? And the answer is always, Jamie, no one's doing this. This is amazing. So I'm not really that useful in terms of feedback, but I would strongly recommend anybody who's got college aspirations to swim, SwimIntel, you have got to check it out.
Well, please join me in welcoming Jamie Bailey.
It's great to be here. And the one thing that Benji either he doesn't know or he forgot is I was a swimmer too. I think he mistakes all my questions for me not knowing about swimming. But I was a multi-sport athlete in school, and I was a swimmer, which is one of the reasons I pushed my daughter into swimming as well. And now my 10-year-old's a swimmer as well. And the one thing I will tell you about that story Benji told me, I tell it a little bit differently. Because my story is a little bit more, it's a little bit funnier, but it's also actually true. When I started this process, I actually wasn't trying to create a company. I was actually just trying to create a tool to help my daughter. And I really didn't understand, how college coaches were graded out. And it turns out they weren't, because it came from a simple question my daughter asked me. And she said, Dad, I don't want to go to college and stare at the bottom of the pool for 4 years and not get faster. Who makes you faster? And that question was fascinating to me. It was absolutely fascinating. And I was like, I know data, and, I know enough from swimming from, like talking Benji's ear off for years, being that annoying parent. And so I actually set out and I started collecting data, and I decided, well, the best way to grade out these college coaches is just to see who makes you faster as a freshman and all the way through college. And so I started making this list out, and the data was blowing me away. So I took it to Benji, and I brought my laptop to the pool deck and I showed it to him. And I said, look at this data, man. This is wild. At this point, it was just in spreadsheets and stuff, right? No idea that, I kind of thought maybe it could be a product, right? But I was really like focused on helping my kid out. And he looks at this data. He puts his glasses on and he stares at it, and he pulls them down and he looks at me and he said, two things. He said, number one, he's like, you're going to get people fired. And number two, this is awesome. We got to make this a product. And after that, I was like, all right, I'm not like making this up in my head. This is actually really valuable stuff. And that was the beginning of SwimIntel. And that was early 2023.
Well, Jamie, going back to the dark ages of swimming, I can tell you stories about swimmers who were recruited and signed by colleges, and they had not even been in the water for a year, and the college didn't even bother to ask about them. It was kind of like, gee, I'm not going to rat out any swimmer, but if a college coach called me and said, how are you doing in the water? I would try to evade that as best I could. But if they kept asking questions, I would eventually give up and say, they're not swimming. Why are you even recruiting them? So Yeah, this goes a long way towards responsibility, I think, on both sides, probably. I think that's great. You represent a real departure for us. We really don't know you, so please be patient with us. And we've been asking our guests to tag someone. Benji tagged you, so you can blame him. And the fact that he tagged you, based on your relationship with Benji, does that make you happy or sad?
It actually makes me very happy because I'll tell you, Benji is one of my favorite people. And as I have traversed the swimming world the last 2.5 years, 3 years, it is rare that I come across somebody that does not know this man. I swear I could take him to an airport in the middle of the world. And I'm pretty sure we would run into somebody that knows Benji. But the number of coaches and athletes that have a connection to Benji is impressive. So it has been absolutely awesome to go down this journey with Benji and bounce all these ideas off of him. So yes, no, I can't lie. I'm thrilled that he tagged me.
So statistically speaking, is Benji the Kevin Bacon of swimming?
Now that you say that, he might be. Might be. My daughter, right before this podcast started recording, I told him my daughter just texted me and said, "Hey, I'm on a training trip, and one of Benji's former swimmers is coaching us." And I was like, wow.
Aubrey, I'll explain to you later who Kevin Bacon is.
That's okay. Hey, you know what? That's what the internet's for. Everyone should be looking this up right as they're listening. So anyway, tell us a little bit about yourself, your family, your occupation, where you're originally from. I presume you're in Nashville now, but go ahead and give us a little background.
Yeah, so I grew up in rural Kentucky, and in rural Kentucky, we did not have a ton of opportunities for sports. So every sport I could get my hands on, I played. I come from a family full of basketball players, basketball coaches, semi-basketball players. They all wanted me to be a basketball player. I was literally this height. I'm about 5'10". I was 5'10" when I was in 7th grade. They thought I was going to be a 6'6" point guard. And the more they pushed me to being a basketball player, the more I decided I hated it. And so I kept playing that into high school. I swam, I played baseball, I played tennis. To be honest with you, baseball was the sport I loved the most. But when I got out of school, chose not to pursue any got out of high school, did not pursue anything collegiately. I toyed around with playing baseball in college, but I really wasn't that good. Unlike Benji, who was a swimmer at Syracuse, which is fantastic. And now I will tell you that not playing sports in college was a huge regret for me because I didn't understand at the time how many doors being a collegiate athlete opens the rest of your life. And that was always a regret for me. Always. Even if I had to go to a small junior college to play baseball, I should have done it. And this is one of the things I tell all the athletes that we help is that if you love swimming and you have any desire to swim in college, do it. It is an amazing thing to do. I went to college as I focused on engineering, specifically electrical and computer engineering. And when I got out of school, I thought I would work for large corporations my entire life. I was an integrated circuit designer, an ASIC designer for 11 years and a systems engineer. So I was a massive nerd. But about 11 years in, I got the itch to start a company and I had to do it. And I started a data company. It was a data analytics, a data ingestion company called Initial State Technologies. And I started that from an idea on the back of a napkin. I raised several $1,000,000, built a team, built the products, launched it around the world. And then we were acquired by a publicly traded company in 2018. And so that was a really great experience for me because, I started off as, kind of a grunt in a big Fortune 500 company, moved in to the entrepreneurial space, started a company, had a good outcome. Then, about that time that my daughter was starting that college process. And as Benji alluded to, as I was asking him 10 million questions all the time and calling him, um, you know, I saw this opportunity with swimming. And I think the best companies are the ones that you create because you need them. And that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to create another company, something that I was passionate about. And swimming is a sport I love. And in general, I love sports so much. It annoys my wife so much, but I love all sports so much. But college sports are absolutely my favorite. And an opportunity to insert a company that could do something good in swimming, which I think we're just starting what we can do, has been fantastic. Yes, I am a nerd. Yes, I am a data person. Yes, I am a startup person. But at heart, I am the biggest sports fan you will ever meet.
Thank you for relieving me from the burden of asking, are you a nerd question. So that makes me look better because I was really didn't want to ask that one. But, to get things, so your family, you have a daughter and The other children?
Yeah, so I have a daughter in college, and she is a
10-year-old
swimmer in
daughter.
college. Yes, and she swims at Emory. She's on her training trip at this very moment. I have a 10-year-old son, so they're spaced about 10 years apart. That Benji gets to see on deck a lot, and
Yeah.
he is quite the character. And I am determined to make him a freestyle sprinter. That is my goal. Is he's going to be a sprinter in the world of college recruiting? It is good to be a freestyle sprinter.
That helps.
And I have a wife, and yeah, we live just south of Nashville, and we love it here. So it's a great place to be.
So you grew up in Kentucky. Do like young Kentucky kids, do they have to drink bourbon before they're 12 or anything? Is there?
It is a requirement, actually. Like if you get sick, a little bit of bourbon makes you better. So yeah. And so,
Okay.
yeah, I know probably a little bit too much about bourbon.
All right, well, I think demystifying the world is one of our missions in this podcast. And now that we can cross that one off the list, we can really move on. Did you cross Benji's path or did he cross yours? How would you guys describe your meeting? Who was the chicken? Who was the egg?
I'm going to say I was that annoying parent that had a kid that I was promising. And then I was just like, poking Benji on the shoulder going, hey, how's my daughter doing? Hey, how's my daughter doing? But I don't know if that's how Benji remembers me or not, but I'm pretty sure I was annoying.
No, I don't remember. Hey, Jeff can certainly vouch. You're barely a half a standard deviation.
Don't get me in trouble, Benji.
Yeah,
Don't get me in
right.
trouble. That's not the point of this.
Yeah, in some podcasts you should tell war stories of
Jamie, you said you said you love sports. Do you swim or how else do you get your burn? What do you do out there?
So I do swim a little bit, but I do not like to swim in front of people because I'm no longer very good at it. So I will privately swim some. I love to run, CrossFit type of stuff. So yeah, I still try to stay active. I figured since I have a 10-year-old son, I better stay healthy for now so that I'm not that super old man that has a young son.
Well, I thought Benji was going to immediately launch into the fact that and I was known as the cheapest man ever or something like that. Somebody said that when I married my wife, Lisa, somebody said the cheapest man in the West End where we live just married the woman who shops at the thrift stores. But I used to swim, I took yours one step further. I thought you were going to mention this, Benji. I used to swim in an unlit pool because I could see and I didn't want to waste the club's money. One of the coaches like, why don't you turn on the light? And I was something like, I don't know, I want to teach all you guys the value of $1, how it can add up. And as a statistics guy, I'm sure you can get that. And what's your favorite kind of music? And do you listen to that music via headphone or are you a free range kind of guy?
So my taste of music, I like everything. And so my daughter thinks I'm the weirdest person ever, but I go from, rock to, hip hop to jazz. Honestly, I literally have been listening to Sinatra a lot lately, which I think just makes my daughter think I'm even weirder. So my taste in music is very eclectic. But when I'm working, which I spend, I think, the majority of my life in front of this laptop, a lot of times it's just whatever I can put on that helps me get through whatever task I have to do. So it's a bit of everything, believe it or
So
not.
you going free range or are you doing the headphones?
Definitely headphones. Definitely
Okay.
headphones because nobody wants to listen to the stuff that I listen to.
Fair enough. That's very good. Now, do you listen to podcasts? Do you get any inspiration from podcasts? And if you
Absolutely.
if you could share those with me, I know Benji's kept up with Secure Team 10 or whatever it was, but go ahead.
So I probably listen to some weird podcasts, but I like some of the startup podcasts, the startup stories that are told. And the name's escaping me now, but the one that goes through the origin stories of startups, that's a wonderful one. Another one called the All In Podcast, which is great, which is a bunch of, startup people that get around and have conversations like this. That one's amazing. And then, of course, the Joe Rogan podcast is always informative. So I love that one. And then we have a handful of swimming podcasts that are always interesting because I do have a podcast that at least I had season 1 last year with college coaches. So I like to be a host as well. I tell people I'm a terrible, no good, awful interviewer, but I have great guests and I just ask a couple of questions and then they take over and they create great podcast episodes for me.
You're doing great so far. I don't get that at all. Are you a reader? Do you read a lot? Genre you read or are you just too busy to read?
Again, I'm a weirdo like that. I read a lot of different things. I go from reading, the Jack Reacher books to reading books about startups and history to I don't know, reading weird teenage science fiction stuff. So yeah, I love to read stuff all the time. But it depends on what's in my head at the moment. So, sometimes I'm going through some marketing challenge or, I need to create a company, and then I'll dig more into, startup stories and business books. But again, very, just like my music, very eclectic taste there.
Well, if you have any advice for Aubrey and me, we'd certainly be willing to take that on. Where on your website describes you as, or a line on your website, as a serial entrepreneur. That's not like being a serial murderer, is it? Is it better? I mean, I get confused very easily.
I will tell you, if I could rewind back to 2012 when I started my first company, I might just shake the life out of me and say, don't do it, because it is its unique brand of hell sometimes starting a company. So I have become that guy that is the old man that can tell a million stories. I can tell you so many stories about startup land, and I have seen so much of it, the good, the bad, the all. Down here in Nashville, I call some of the people around here the Nashville Predators, not the hockey players. There's just a lot of bad actors in this particular world, and I've seen a lot of it. I probably would change my mind about starting all these companies. I don't know. I had a good stable life designing chips. I'm not sure why I left that. Can't go back now though.
That's great. So your pursuit of swimming statistics, did this begin as an avocation and then turn into a vocation? Is that kind of what this is doing for you right now?
Yeah, I really, this started off as just a bunch of spreadsheets. It really was just a bunch of spreadsheets. And we weren't sure that we wanted to make it a company until we started basically, it started with my daughter, and then we started sharing it with some of the athletes that excel. And there was one particular athlete that I wanted to show her what I had built. This is Anna, by the way, if you remember. Anna was the very first one. And so I was like, you know what I'll do? I'm going to make a presentation, and I'm just going to show her where she fits in the world of college swimming based off of all this data and analytics that I've created. And so I sit down with her and I make this presentation. And the very first slide, it says customized report for, Anna, last name. And her mom stops me, right? She said, I just want to stop. She's like, I actually have goosebumps just looking at this slide. I can't wait to see what you're about to show me. And it was at that point I was like, oh, actually, this report might actually be a product. And so I go through this and it just walks her through the process. This is what's going to happen in college recruiting, right? I'm going to use your term, I'm going to demystify the college recruiting process so you understand what's going to happen. I'm going to show you which conferences you fit into, and I'm going to tell you why. And then I'm going to match you up with colleges, and I'm going to tell you why. So we're going to quantify you as a recruit. We're going to match you up. And as we kind of walk through that, I realized that this is what she was looking for. And I called that a best fit report. And a few weeks later, we actually ended up making that sort of the core. And this is what for the athletes, this is what we do. They come in, they don't really understand how the process works. And we show them exactly what's going to happen from beginning to end. So they know what to do, when to do it, so they don't make a mistake. And it was almost like I stumbled into it. It's almost accidental getting into that because, it did start off as just helping my daughter out. Then it was like, well, let's just see if this will help other people out. And then a lot of the way the product evolved kind of fell into our lap because it just made sense.
One of the things that he's got so many offshoots of this that are so impressive to me. But recently, he's been doing this thing on social media where he'll take meet results from everything happening in the country, and he will promote the 10 most, I'm going to say this badly, but the 10 most exciting uncommitted seniors, right? So kids who are not his customers, kids who maybe have never heard of SwimIntel, and suddenly they're a post and they say, hey, Aubrey Bowles just had an unbelievable 200 freestyle at the Maryland Invite. And so he's just got so much of the data. But I'm wondering if you could share, Jay, how this evolved from I'm going to provide this report for kids, and all of a sudden you've got colleges who are banging on your door for memberships. And how did that transition?
So this is a great point and a great question. There was a point, and I know you all can sympathize with this. My son, he comes home from school, and he said, yeah, I don't hang out with the sporty kids. And I'm like, what do you mean sporty kids? He goes, the kids that play sports. And I'm like, baby, you're a swimmer. You're a really good swimmer. He goes, oh, they said that doesn't count. And I was like, oh, okay, yeah. So that got to me, and that was really a foundation for a lot of what we do. And in my opinion, swimming is an elite sport. It has some of the most elite athletes in the country, the most disciplined athletes. And by the way, college swimmers make some of the best employees you will ever have too, because it takes a lot of discipline and rigor to get through 4 years of that. And philosophy of SwimIntel is that the athletes are the stars, the coaches are the stars. It's not the product, it's not me, it's not the data. The athletes are the stars, the coaches are the stars. That's what we do in our podcast. The coaches are the stars. It's not about me. And so how, this really evolved from a data thing to it's all about the athlete. That's really, sort of the genesis of all of it, is ensuring that these athletes get the proper promotion. Another thing is, I'm really good friends with Mel Stewart, the CEO of SwimSwam. If you look at SwimSwam, always the top end athletes, right? It's the kids on the national team, it's the Olympians, right? And that's great. That's his business. But man, there is so much excitement that happens at the conference level. There are so many superstars that will never see the television for Olympics. And that is a shame, because we have some elite athletes that deserve the recognition. And so part of what our mission is at SwimIntel, a big part of that is we want to bring all the things that are cool about other sports that for some reason swimming hasn't had. We're bringing them to swimming. That's why we have a 5-star ranking system. That is exactly why we have a 5-star ranking system, because you understand what a 5-star quarterback is in college, right? Well, you should have that same ranking as a swimmer in high school. And so for sophomores, juniors, and seniors, anyone that's swimming in the United States, we have their meet results. You already have stars. We know what your stars are. And when they go from a 4-star athlete to a 5-star athlete, which will have about 20 to 25 per class per year, we celebrate that. But when we have a kid that goes from a 2-star to a 3-star, we celebrate that too online. And what the post that Benji is mentioning is our uncommitted momentum post series that we do, where we have 2026 uncommitteds. Some of them are absolutely blowing up right now, absolutely blowing up. And one of the very first ones that we promoted, this kid actually in Florida who he killed it in the meet, and he jumped from 2-star to 4-star. And I was like, man, we've got to put this kid out on social media, because SwimSwam's not going to post that. That's not what they do. Nobody else is, right? So why should his accomplishments be buried? We wanted to really bring that to life. And the funny thing about doing that is that we started getting all this outreach from coaches who were like, man, this is great. Nobody's pushing this stuff. Like, I had no idea this kid was doing this, because he's a senior. And sometimes these boys break out crazy late, right? And so instead of them not swimming in college, right, we want to help them, promote them, because they are the stars. So I know I kind of danced around your question, Benji, but that is absolutely what we want to do. Everything that is cool about football, from NIL, promotions, 5-star ranking systems, all that stuff, that is the stuff we're focused on bringing into swimming.
Well, what was really cool to me that there was a certain college in Florida, and I don't know if I send my times to you. They sent me a recruiting letter when I was in right around, I don't know, 55 to 60. So do you think that would prevent colleges like that from sending recruiting letters to people like me? Would that be a potential use for these people?
I think what we really want to do is right now, if you think about how college recruiting works more than anything right now, and there's an athlete that's one of Benji's athletes that inspired this part. Right now, if you want to be recruited in college, if you think about swimming in college recruiting, it people say it's all about times. It's all about times, right? So they think, oh, well, if you have the times, you'll get recruited. And so, you go to USA Swimming Database, you go to other databases, you can find their times. But here's the reality, is that times without context aren't enough. There's a story behind those times. And so one of Benji's athletes has a phenomenal story behind her times. She's faced a tremendous amount of adversity. And so while her times are good, when you understand her background, you realize her times are elite, because she has potential that you cannot tell from just reading, 100 fly, 55, 75. You can't tell what she's going to do. And so what we want to do for these athletes is give them an opportunity to tell their story, push their story as an email to a coach, but also post their story to their profile so coaches can discover them. Because the one thing about this particular athlete, while she is very elite, she was also very targeted in who she wanted to tell her story to. So she was telling her story to a very small group of people in places that it's warm. And I'm like, you need to tell your story up in the Northeast, because there's so much swimming up there, right? But those coaches never knew her story. And because they didn't know her story, she didn't get recruited by them. Now, ultimately, she gets recruited by an SEC school because that's who she reached out to.
This has got to be, what you're doing has got to create a little competition among the coaches out there because they're aware of the story going out there and they want to be that person. Can you remember when you first began you've obviously love and admire numbers. You mentioned baseball, and I know baseball has tons of statistics to it. Did swimming kind of attract you because swimming has a lot that's based on statistics?
Yes, actually, this is a great insight, Jeff. Absolutely great. So one of my favorite things to do, I would say back in 2003, 2004, 2005, I played fantasy baseball. And I loved baseball so much because of the data and the analytics and the statistics around it. Now, I played a lot of fantasy football, and I started fantasy football the year Yahoo released fantasy football. So I did it a long, long time ago. But the thing about football that drove me nuts was that one of the last years I played fantasy football, one of the girls in our annual leagues, she got pregnant. So she never reordered her draft. It was just standard draft. She never changed her lineup, and she won the whole thing. The whole thing. She didn't do anything. She won the whole thing. But I'll tell you, every year in baseball, one of three of us would win out of that group of 15. And it was because we knew what we were doing. And you actually had to understand the statistics, the movement, and you had to pay attention. It was much more skill-based. And I love that. I still love that about baseball. It's such a wonderful statistical sport. And so what drew me into swimming was more than just that I swam. It's more than just my kids were swimming. Is I love the aspects of it. Even now, I'm still doing all this research around training and how you balance that, aerobic foundation with that, your power work and the formulas that coaches use to get the most out of their kids in club and how that pairs up with how college coaches train. That to me is fascinating. Also, and I know Benji, you can talk to this. Whenever your athlete is off, like, why did I not drop time? Being able to diagnose that, it's not just, oh, well, you didn't have a great race, get them next time, right? Like, why? Was it my tempo? Is it my stroke count? Am I not pulling water? Are my turns off? Do I have no back half endurance? Like, diagnose what is wrong. And so many coaches, they use anecdotal evidence, not statistic-based evidence to do that. And I know that's something that Benji's been working on. I'd love for him to talk about that. But I think that those parts and that data part of swimming, it is a science. And to me, man, it is fascinating.
Products that you offer. I mean, obviously, it's a business. If you can describe, from the recruits, the college, what are the products that you offer?
So very simple thing is that we help athletes find colleges where they fit, and we help college coaches find athletes that fit their system. And we do that with data. We do that with analytics. We did build our own predictive AI model, and that took several months to build. So we have a model that looks like a coach basically and says, this is, I see where you are today. This is where I'm going to predict you're going to be at over the next 4 years. A 55 flat, 100 free flyer female. And I want to know, and I come from Benji's group at Excel, and I'm really curious how I will do in the Big Ten. They can use this model to make those predictions. And so we help them find places where they'll thrive, because I don't know if you know this or not, but 1 out of 6 freshman swimmers will not come back and swim their sophomore year. And I think a lot of that is poor choice on their part of finding the right programs. And so we want to make that stat better. We want to see less kids drop out from freshman and sophomore year.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because every year I've sent an email to the Nova swimmers who are entering their senior year. And I have to go back and I have our list of our graduating seniors. Then I have to go find out who's still actually swimming. Benji, can you guess what the percentage is on, and I'm talking about kids who actually, not kids who graduated but didn't go on and swim in college, but kids who went on and swim at Division I, Division II, Division III. What percentage do you think make it through all 4 years?
I bet Jamie can tell you.
Okay.
And I'm not kidding.
I don't think I can tell you.
Out of Nova. So Nova's a gold medal club, usually. So I'm going to say that means that Nova typically has done a pretty good job of getting results out of the kids at a younger age. So in some cases, that actually makes progression in college a little more frustrating.
Counterintuitive, yep.
Yeah. I'm going to say from that swam freshman year but did not swim senior year, I'm going to guess 70%.
I guess Nova's doing a little bit better than you think. Most of this year's group is actually a little bit better, but usually about 50%.
Well, yeah. 50.
50%. And you never know what's doing that. It could be, I mean, they could go into, I know there's some schools, like I know UVA, if you get into School of Architecture, you're going to swim 2 years. You're probably not going to swim the last 2 years. Or at least that's what people said at one point in time. So as far as that goes. Amy, if we can get back and kind of what you're saying, we're getting back to baseball. And I always remember baseball I was always trying to figure out, when I first, what's the batting average? How do they get an ERA? How do they do this? How do they do that? And then baseball statistics absolutely multiplied into all sorts of, and I think that was what's called the sabermetrics revolution, or whatever you want to call it, sabermetrics approach. You've probably seen the movie Moneyball, and you may have read the book by Michael Lewis. So, do you see that that's something that very much like what you're doing?
Yes, 100%. That's a really good insight, because one of the things that we tell college coaches that come into SwimIntel is that we give them tools to play Moneyball. And the tools that we give them is that we do have analytics on pretty much every club in the country. So we know how much time on average Nova swimmers drop in college. And so, as well as Excel and every other club in the country. And so it doesn't mean that it's definitely going to happen, but there definitely are patterns that we see with certain clubs as they train those athletes and then they go into college environments. But that also gets paired up with certain environments that they go into. So, for example, one of the reasons that Nashville Aquatic Club has had so much success sending kids to Virginia is that those training styles really mesh well. Very much. So much so you saw Spencer Nicholas out of Nashville Aquatic Club, freshman year, breaks the UVA record for the 100 fly. Why? Because training was probably seamless. I wasn't there to see it, but very similar training styles. A lot of that jives well. On my podcast, I had an opportunity to interview Coach Perini at Denison, and he talked about how he took one USRPT, ultra short race-based training swimmer, one time, and I'll never do it again. He's like, I just didn't realize how hard it would be to take such a low yardage swimmer and put him in a high yardage environment. He said it did not work, and I'll never do it again. And so those are anecdotes, but in general, yes, it's Moneyball. It's about understanding, where athletes come from, the training that they've done, and how they're going to fit into your environment. Because now more than ever, with resources constrained and the pressure is on, you need to win. And you can't recruit kids that are going to burn out their freshman year or injury prone, or are really just, they're tapped out because they've been swimming 10,000 yards a day since the age of 13.
Not to point the finger in the other direction. I always thought, and I've heard this from other coaches, and sorry, college coaches, if I'm offending any of you if you're watching it, but I heard another coach once when we got a transfer in from a team in Florida, and I called the coach up and I said, tell me about this guy. We've got a very small amount of time about him. He said, Coach, you're the first coach who's ever called me. And I knew exactly what he meant. So I'm wondering sometimes when some of these things, some of the predictions could have been, prevented by simply a college coach asking a couple of questions, figuring out, just going in. As age group coaches, I mean, sometimes you get asked, some coaches would be very good about asking, but a lot of them, not so much. And as I said, this one coach, and he had produced some pretty high level talent. He said, you're the first coach who's ever called to ask me about that. And I know the statistics is a big part of it, and I know that's what we're talking about here. But sometimes just that little, pick up the phone and be willing to ask good questions. I mean, I wanted to make the college coach work for his answer. That is, if he said, well, what kind of kid is he? I mean, what am I going to say? I'm not going to say very much at all. I mean, I'd say very positive things about a good kid. And I wouldn't say much about a kid. I thought, I don't know how this kid's going to do. I really don't know how to answer that question. So how do you combine the subject, or do you realize there's this gap between the objective and the subjective, or do you think the objective is a big enough wave that it covers the sand between, the shore and the ocean?
No, I think your insights are spot on. I think there is a lot of subjectivity in recruiting. And I think an example would be Coach John Howell at Emory. He doesn't recruit a kid unless he can talk to the club coach. He just doesn't do it. It is one of his prereqs. I don't know what he asked on those calls. I'm sure Benji has gotten several of them. I know he sent several kids to Emory, but a lot of coaches, a lot of the best coaches do that. And I think there is a lot of subjectivity in that. Now, when you talk to coaches on how they recruit, Some literally just recruit looking at times. That's all they look at. But they also don't typically have the best progression and improvement with their athletes either. And I will point out the coaching staff that I think is one of the top coaching staffs in the country is Coach Dorncott at Ohio State. And I know they love it when I tout this statistic because it's awesome and they deserve the credit for it. But, Ohio State women, they won the Big Ten last year. They won the Big Ten, I think, 4 out of the last 5 years, 4 out of the last 6 years. If you look, they consistently have the best improvement across the Big Ten, consistently. But if you look at their recruitment, they are typically the number 6 recruiting class in the Big Ten. So there's 5 colleges that recruit faster athletes out of high school, but they have the top improvement and they win every year. 2 ways to win in college swimming. You can recruit better than everybody else, you can develop better than everybody else, or some combination of the two. You look at what Coach Dorncott is doing at Ohio State, it's development. But it's not just development. He wants to watch swimmers swim. He gets the insights on what he can make better, and he chooses his athletes very carefully. And I think Coach Papel at South Carolina does this as well with his athletes, especially on the female side. And he knows how to get more out of them. I have not talked to a coach like Dorncott. He understands improvement at a different level than a lot of coaches. And it is fascinating to see that. And I do think there's some subjectivity in there. What we're trying to do is provide some tools and service some things that will help them in that evaluation.
There's so many things that working with Jamie that I would never have guessed. I would not have known. One of the things I'm fascinated with, and Jamie, you could either support me on this or say I'm crazy, but the colleges that have the highest academics, and I think the service academies, that's a rough freshman year, right? And it's where the adjustment from senior year to freshman year is the hardest. Anecdotally, I would say, oh, what's the Ivy League doing the freshman year? But then if you look at this trend, you go, that's drinking from a fire hose. Am I right on those statistics?
No, you are. And I think that's what makes it really fascinating when you show these athletes where they could go and where they could fit, because you'll have a lot of athletes that say, well, I want to go to an academically highly selective school, but I also want to have fantastic swimmer improvement. Well, the thing is that goes in opposite directions. If you just look statistically across all the highly selective academic schools, they are overall below average in improvement compared to non-highly selective. But there are outliers and some fascinating outliers. So William and Mary is a good example of this. Great academics, very highly selective, but has a phenomenal improvement rate. Phenomenal. And when you look at that, you got to understand, you go, why? What are they doing, right? What are they doing for that? So Jeff is excited here, so I'll let him chime in.
No, I went to William and Mary, so that's why I was just, they let everybody in. It was a downhill thing.
Here's another statistic, Jeff. I'm going to throw you a trivia question. What would you guess is the average improvement rate of female freshman swimmers across Division I
in their top events?
Well, here's the thing I've seen. You've got a couple of factors playing in. So if I can answer it with how difficult this question is to answer. Number one, they have the excitement of going away to college, which is all very exciting. Number two, suddenly your every need is not being taken care of. If you get sick, it's up to you to get to the dorm. If you get to the clinic, whatever, they're going to take care of you. Number three, you get to eat whatever you want. Maybe you're just not taking care of yourself. There are a lot of factors. And then you get to go to a college meet for your first time, a college championship meet. All those things are very exciting. I'm always surprised. I always said about any freshman swimmer, I think it's great when they go faster because there's so many adjustments that need to be made. And that kind of speaks to Jamie's point about somewhat about being the seamless move into it. I also think that I can give you a very interesting stat about a female swimmer who, because her training shifted summer and then to college, she went basically 8 different pulses of training. She got dramatically better because her body kept having to adjust to it. And a long answer, I'll get up my soapbox. Angie, I think it probably would be, I think they probably marginally improve, would be my guess.
You got the marginally part right.
They marginally get slower. So the average improvement
doesn't surprise me.
The best swimming minds that we have in college swimming, that's probably not fair, but the Division I coaches, right, where the statistics are. So at least you would expect some of the very best minds we have and the most resources and that's the results, right?
But I would give them a pass. I would say there's so many things going on. I would look more to the sophomore and junior years. That's where I would look at. I mean, I
Okay,
realize that
well,
some are going to be so excited there, but to me, the sophomore and junior year would be a much better judgment on that particular program because, I mean, yeah, they can go faster in their freshman year. They can go slower. I just kind of go, well, I'd wait and see how they did their sophomore year.
Aubrey, you got to cut this part out. I was trying to make Jeff look stupid, and he's nailing it with every answer. You're exactly right. So, Jamie, what's the full career? So, what's the full career improvement now? Where Jeff suggests maybe it gets
Don't cut
better.
this out. Don't cut this out.
Okay, so this is good. So I'll give you the numbers. So on average, the average female swimmer will add 0.12% to their best events through their freshman year. So in other words, they will get a little bit slower. Through college, they will drop around 1.4%, between 1.4 and 1.5% in their top two events. For the men is a little different. The average freshman male will drop about 0.7% through their freshman year in their best event. So they will, on average, get better. They will drop about 1% more on average than the females through college. They'll drop around 2.4%. And that is across all swimmers.
So one of the factors there is when you say drop those times, we have to consider in dropping times, were they able to make finals? And suddenly they're going to meets where making finals is a lot harder. And that is part of the evaluation, correct? So we are comparing an apple to an orange, where a lot of times they may be going to meets. I mean, Benji, we would see it at NCSAs. We'd see some kids with these really fantastic times, but apparently they weren't very good at swimming prelims. And they were in a state where coming back was automatic. So they got that evening swim. And I think sometimes, for these colleges, that's probably a factor that suddenly there's 24 coming back in the big conferences, 24. And that means that takes an enormous number of kids who aren't going to have that evening opportunity.
It is. And I think, there's multiple factors there too. You have some coaches love to redshirt athletes, but I'll tell you, most athletes don't love to be redshirted. It's all the work and it's none of the meets and none of the glory. If you're working all year and your coach won't send you on a taper meet, if you don't get to swim suited, you don't get that opportunity to drop time. And that can be on the athlete. It can be on the coach as well. So, my personal belief is, and it's just my belief, is that I believe that coaches need to give these athletes an opportunity to show off their improvements one way or the other. So if you're going to ask them to grind it out in practice, they should get that opportunity for that taper meet somehow, some way. Coaches can make that happen. And I really don't like it. It really bothers me when I see an athlete never get to swim rested and suited all through the year because the coach never provided that opportunity. I think that one's on the coach. I think it's on the coach if you consistently redshirt almost as a punishment. I don't like that. We see a lot of dropouts after that redshirt year. And I've never heard of many athletes that love to be redshirted, not swimmers.
Baseball has a really interesting statistical area. I think it's interesting. UAR, wins above replacement. Are you familiar with that?
No.
Well, it's basically, I don't, from what I understand, it's how much more you're producing than the next person who's like you, who could be you. As in, if you're hitting 300, I guess they look at the guy who's hitting 295 and they see how much better you are than the next comparable person at your position. Do you see that maybe creating some categories for college swimmers along the idea of a WAR category that might be interesting, where you look and you're the data guy. I just have seen how baseball has created these categories literally to help them, it seems, play the game better, or in some cases, and this is where it's applicable to swimming, to trade the game better. Trade for this player, trade for that player. And that would apply to recruiting, it would seem to me. But go ahead. If I've been clear enough to let you run with it.
No, it's a good point, because when you look at how college coaches, a lot of college coaches, if not most college coaches, they're architecting their team around conference points, right? 99% of college coaches are incentivized by how they do at conference championships. That's the way their athletic director is going to look at them. That's the way they get hired, fired, promoted. And so it is all about conference points. And by the way, that makes its way back to how you get recruited as an athlete, is how you contribute to what incentivizes college coaches. Okay, I got to score points at Big Tens. I've got to score points at Patriot League, whatever the conference is. you understand the structure, A, B, maybe a C final, and then you understand your roster limit constraints, especially in the Power Four conferences. Now you are architecting points. And this is what swimmers have to understand. The coaches have to architect points. It is not personal. It is their livelihood. It is their job. And, again, if I go back to a podcast that I did with Coach Dorncott talked about how, for him, it's relays, freestyle sprinters, and divers. This is how you win the Big Tens. This is what he does, right? Now he puts an emphasis on divers. It works for him. So what does that mean? Well, it means that he's probably not going to carry 4 distance freestyle swimmers on his roster if his roster is limited to 25 swimmers and 5 divers, right?
He has a tower available to him.
Yeah.
Correct? So
Yeah.
he has a tower, because I don't think UVA places much emphasis on divers at all because they don't have a tower.
That's right. So I think there's in some ways, coaches have always been playing Moneyball. They've always been trying to architect points, even back to the days of Florida bringing all distance swimmers and shocking everybody by coming in. I think they came in second in the SEC with a bunch of distance swimmers. Again, architecting points. So I think what SwimIntel is trying to do is surface some more analytics and insights to help them better play Moneyball. But the recruits need to understand this is how the game is played. This is how the game is played. If you want to play the game, understand the rules. You want to be recruited, understand the rules. And so one of the things that I love to tell athletes as they're going through the process and they're trying to figure out as a sophomore, hey, what should my third event be? Which, I'm already doing, maybe they're doing 1 back and 2 back, or they're doing, maybe they're flyer, right? And they're like, my third event, what should it be? And I usually go to 2 free. Do you like the 2 free? Because you got to realize the 8 free relay is really important to college coaches. And it's so important if you go and you look at UAAs last year, UAAs was determined by the fact that UAAs scored B relays and Emory women were 8 deep on 2 freestylers. And so without that B relay, I'm not sure. I think statistically Emory doesn't win UAAs because they were 8 deep, they did. This is important because that means that a conference like UAAs that scores B relays, they're going to need to be 8 deep. And you need to think about that as a recruit. If you're trying to decide between, IM or 2 free, if you love them both, free is more valuable for a lot of coaches, if not all coaches.
Can you speak to one of the most confusing things that all recruits have, right? Is they can see the results and then they see the recruiting standards and they're like, what? I know you deal with this all the time.
Yeah. So I hate these published recruiting standards. They are terrible because they confuse everybody. So first off, I'll tell you that coaches put out these recruiting standards, and a lot of times it depends on, what day of the year you caught them on, because those recruiting standards will change throughout the year. They're based on the need of the team. They already may be 10 deep in freestyle sprinters. Therefore, this year, they may have a really, really high standard for the next freestyle sprinter. They may have 1 roster spot left because that is the constraint, and they may be looking for something very specific. So those recruiting standards, those numbers just do not tell the full context of recruiting. And so it confuses kids. The other thing is that kids will say, that recruiting standard is faster than everyone on your team. Why? That doesn't make any sense. And they come to me and they're confused. They're like, why is this coach asking for a 23 flat freestyler when he doesn't have a 23 flat freestyler? And I'm like, well, first off, there's more context to it. But if the coach isn't scoring points in conference with his current team, he may not want other kids just like his current team. Understand, it's very complicated. And that's why recruiting standards just aren't great. So what I love to show the athletes is that the best way to predict if you're fast enough for a team is to look at where you're at right now and compare it to where the athletes on the current team were in high school, and then look and see where they are at conference. If they're already at the bottom of the conference and you're at the same speed of their current roster, you may not be recruited. They may want to up level because it is that coach's job. And that is why it's confusing. And sometimes the athletes need a little bit of help. And that's what we do. And that was the thing I didn't tell you about with SwimIntel, is that we're not just a data company. We actually offer human support. And I think you have companies, SwimCloud is great. I have nothing bad to say about SwimCloud. They're all data. They're no people. When you look at these recruiting agencies that I'm not going to mention them by name, they're all people, no data. And we float in the middle where we offer that intersection of people and data, because often data without context is dangerous. And that's what we try to provide.
Like, I like to get in the way back machine from time to time. And I don't know if you know, but Benji's college dual meet record at Arkansas was not good. Do you think that SwimIntel could have helped Benji
Ah,
at that time? I believe he was an offer. Do you think that that could have helped him?
I think we could have helped Benji identify clubs to recruit from that he could have gotten more out of his swimmers. Because I know Benji can improve a swimmer, but I think college coaches sometimes have a hard time understanding what they're getting into with these athletes. And I think we have helped some colleges identify some athletes that have a better chance of improving. So again, I could help Benji play some money ball.
Why don't you ask Jeff about his hiring standards? Guess where that coach got a job.
That's a good one. That's very fair. And I'm going to have to plead out on that. No doubt about that. Jamie, you probably have heard have you ever heard the statement that was about Mark Twain? And then he of course pawned it off on Disraeli, the British Prime Minister. He said there are three kinds of lies: lies, damned lies, and statistics. Have you ever heard that? And would you care to comment on that, or even to explain, I guess, to sit there and say, to answer the question, can statistics be made to lie?
Absolutely. The biggest liar lies with data, and is another way of saying that. And that's why I really believe you need some context to go with that. In this, I always think in terms of, bigger picture with companies and starting tech companies and the AI revolution. And I think the one thing that we do that we feel like is a moat for us is not just the unique analysis that we do, but I think it is the human element of providing context with that. So that, if you are, anyone can look up their times and compare them to conference times, but sometimes you just don't understand, will I thrive here or not? Am I going to get faster? And I think that is exactly it. I think data by itself can be very dangerous and very misleading. And I think that's why we see a lot of attrition that happens at every class, freshman, sophomore, junior, senior. We see these dropouts because the data didn't tell them what they thought it would. And sometimes you need a human touch because, man, the recruiting process can be confusing. No, not can be. It will be confusing. If you do not have some weird moment in the recruiting process, you consider yourself very lucky, because you will get ghosted by a coach. You won't get that roster spot you thought you would. Somebody will get recruited over you. Something's going to happen that's weird, and you need to ask somebody. And the club coaches, people think, well, I'll just ask my club coach. But I mean, to be honest and blunt, Benji's primary job is not to help you get into college. Benji's primary job right now are the kids that are swimming in that lane. And he is working on making sure that the kids, he has enrollment and that his kids are thriving in the pool. And so Benji, and Benji's a bad example because Benji does keep up with college, but Benji's colleagues are not necessarily keeping up on the world of college swimming recruiting, but the parents believe they do. And this is the gap that we fill, is helping them out without charging them thousands of dollars. That is the other thing, is that people want to rip you off because you have knowledge that they don't. We don't do that, but we do help supplement those club coaches to help college, the whole college process for those athletes.
But to defend myself against the charge of why exactly I did hire Benji, I'm going to find myself praising Benji once again. And I do mean this very heartfelt, because I think about Benji a lot. I go to sleep at night. I got to get in that last thought about Benji. But one of the things you represent, if I could boil things down, you're looking at things very objectively. And I think Benji, and I praised this in a different set of words, but I said, Benji has a superb subjective mind. And I mean that as a very big compliment, that he can look at things and derive subjective truth from a particular circumstance, from a particular person. So, so do you find feeding off Benji a little bit it kind of helps you flesh out your product a little bit? And Benji, maybe you can talk to this too. It kind of a question for the two of you, and you could absolutely get in a big argument right here if you'd like, thrash each other, and boy, are the people watching, they probably love that. Go ahead, you two.
I'll tell you, one of the things that I love about Benji is that Benji is not stuck in his ways. He may be old, but he is not stuck. And so I remember asking Benji, I challenged Benji on, why do you spend so much time on building an aerobic foundation and not get into power work earlier in the season. And he actually took that question and did some research and came back with some really interesting answers about how maybe he needed to readjust, just the timing of his training. And so that is what you will see. There's a lot of hubris. You guys know this. There's a lot of hubris in all coaching, in all sports, and coaches get very, very set in their ways. Benji is not like that. Benji has a much more open mind, which is why it's always a lot of fun to bounce ideas off of Benji. He has a hard time telling me it's a bad idea, but I've learned to read him well
I
enough.
read it. It's funny you say that. I think that the last 8 years at Excel has really kind of forced that on me. Not that it's been something I've resisted, but when I got here 3 years ago, we were the third place team in a city, and we weren't even close, and we couldn't keep doing things the same way. And so I think innovation rarely comes from the team on top. You've got to figure out how to make how to change and make things better. And so, but yeah, working with Jamie on this has been really exciting. And Jamie has constantly pushed the envelope with bigger and better ideas. And I have no idea at this point what's proprietary and what's not. So I guess I can throw it up to what's your next big thing. But it's exciting. And I think that the resources that Jamie is providing, but not just to recruits, but we have colleges that are buying subscription with Jamie. So I don't want to talk about any of your next upcoming things or what you provide to the college coaches.
So with college coaches, we released something recently that that we alluded to earlier, but we have something we released, I guess it was about 7 weeks ago, called SwimIntel, where we actually surface, those big time drops that are happening across all the classes in 2028, 27s and 26s. And this was something that I thought was really important for college coaches to be able to see who's breaking out so they can have first dibs on reaching out. And so that is our newest addition to college coaches. And I will tell you, I absolutely love it because it is like a scouting report for these athletes. You and we don't tell you when they drop time in non-primary events. Who cares if you're a freestyle sprinter and you dropped a bunch of time in the mile? I don't care, right? We point out the things that are relevant. So major time drops and major and primary events. So that is the brand new stuff for college coaches. For the athletes, we are doing a huge NIL push for high school athletes starting in Q1 of this year. And so I believe there is an enormous opportunity for not just brands inside of swimming, but brands outside of swimming to come in, sponsor athletes, help make our meets better. Benji should talk about the awesomeness of the Meet of Champs every December. The last 2 Decembers, it's been sponsored meet, and the highlights of that meet have been made possible by a sponsor outside of swimming, a car dealership, and it is a very large car dealership. It is a very profitable car dealership. But they have made that meet the envy of mid-season taper championship meets. It is amazing, and I believe, and we're gonna double down on that, bringing brands from outside of swimming in to sponsor athletes as well as events and clubs. And I would love for Benji to go through what has happened with Meet of Champs because, quite frankly, those videos have floated around nationally and generated talk around even people around USA Swimming about why all of our meets are not like this.
Well, if I could just ask a question, Benji, can you hold on? Because I don't want to miss this question. You mentioned people making time drops in events that were not their prime events. I'm sure Josephine will probably forgive me, Josephine Fuller. But one of the things that was interesting about Josephine Fuller was precisely her time drops in events that she was not going to swim. But what was interesting about her was her willingness to swim events that I didn't necessarily care if she swam. She came up to me once and she said, I want to go swim the 1500. I was like, huh? I said, well, you don't have to go swim the 1500. She said, no, I want to swim it. And I said, well, okay, how come? And she said, well, because I haven't done it and I just want to swim it. Well, she went and swam it. She came up to me at the same thing and said, well, I haven't done 200 fly long course. I go, okay. And to me, this is a big part of her development, even though it would statistically not be in events that she was going to swim in college. But yet her willingness to try on different events was, kind of like a coach willing to try on different trainings. Is there any allowance in your models for something like that? Because I thought that was a very, though, absolutely kind of off the record, but I thought it was a very significant part of her progress. And I thought this girl's something special. She's special up here.
You know, I think you're bringing up a good point, which is the context in which there's a time drop. Because in your story, that's showing versatility, mental toughness, willing to try different things, right? That's very positive. Another way to look at it is when a kid reaches out to a college coach and they've had a time drop in an off event and no time drops in primary events. And without context, why is that? Are you shifting? Are you shifting to different event specialties? Are you just struggling? Are you just reaching for a positive? And I think that is why data is so dangerous. We need the context because the way you frame what Josephine did is brilliant, right? That is a great way to frame that. And that's the kind of thing as a college coach, if I were a college coach, I would want to understand that. But if I see a kid who specializes in one back, two back, and hasn't dropped since they were 14 years old, I'm concerned. And so I need to understand, do we have an injury? Do we have a technique problem? Do we have a mental block? Are we just no longer developing? Are we transitioning to a different event? I don't understand that. Right. And so I think to your point, even with what we're doing with Recruit Intel, which is surfacing major time drops in primary events, it is very useful. But again, you still need more context to understand, is this my kid? Is this my recruit? And that's why we have to keep getting better at what we do.
So you're saying it is a blend of the objective and the subjective, and
Always.
That's what you're striving for, and to bring that to a college coach in a form that they can use it. Because, a college coach is busy. He's got a lot of people applying. I don't know what the average SEC school gets for athletes coming in, but they got to do some real Hogwarts sorting before the people even get there, Oh, no, you're in the cap that takes you. No. You
Right.
go down the road. So, I think that's an interesting thing as far as that goes. Well, let me ask a different question. The science fiction writer Ray Bradbury once was asked something along the lines of, "Are you trying to predict the future?" And his answer was no. He said he was trying to prevent the future. So, what would you see as some guardrails for what you're doing statistically? Do you see any areas that you could see this could be used the wrong way? I hate to put the darkness into it, but just what you're seeing out there, because you have a unique perspective on this.
Yeah, I think the one thing that we do that can be used in a dark way is there are clubs that just produce athletes that don't drop time. They just do. And I could see colleges sort of, blacklisting those clubs. And I think that's unfair to the athletes because again, I think there's more context required for that. And so I think you have to be careful with data that is being used to improve outcomes, but not to isolate individuals because again, there is always more to the story. And that's one of the reasons why we created the student athlete profiles that we did, because we wanted to give these athletes an opportunity to put their story in words in front of these coaches so that they could discover them, not just push that story. So that if you see a 55 flat flyer, maybe they have leveled off for 3 years, but you don't know what they're going through. Maybe they've had a shoulder injury. Maybe they've had an illness that they battled through, adversity that's going to make them mentally tough through college, right? And so I really want to get away from recruiting in college is all about times. I hate that. That has been the phrase that I've heard over and over and over again from parents for the last several years. It's all about your times. It's not just about your times. There's more to that story. And I think that's where we can guardrail some of the bad is helping to provide context for that. And I think there's also a place for the club coaches to tell their stories as well. If you are, let me give you a great example. So Sandpipers, Coach Aiken, brilliant coach. The kids coming out of Sandpipers do not drop a lot of time in college, especially the distance swimmers. Does that mean you shouldn't recruit from Sandpipers? No. First off, they're winning Olympic medals, right? But you have to understand that Coach Aiken is getting so much out of those athletes that it is not an insult at all. It is actually a compliment to him at what he is able to accomplish. But as a college coach, you have to understand, what you're getting from a Sandpiper swimmer, where they're coming from. Are they one of the homeschooled Sandpipers? Are they not one of the homeschooled? how many hours are they training now? Am I going to take them and am I going to try to just, are we going to go 1-to-1? We're going to go from mile in club to mile in college, but you have to understand the context of the data coming out of that is that as a college coach with 20 hours of limited training in NCAA with kids leaving home, going through a full college academic workload, you may not be able to get the same out of them that Coach Ron does. And I think those are some of the guardrails. It's all about context.
Well, let me ask a question that's near and dear to my heart, and you might be an exploration thing here. And you're talking about Ron prompted that question. I think probably some of those kids probably do better in a long course than they do in short course. So what I've always thought that would be great for American swimming is if the NCAAs had to swim a long course every other year in order to change the recruiting, keep the kids moving on more levels, more cylinders. And I don't guess there's any way to statistically forecast but that's always been a thing I thought, because that would really make that would really force them to hone their recruiting, be a lot sharper in recruiting, and they would actually need services like yours a lot more, because they have to recruit somebody who's well, here's somebody who can swim a long course, and that's going to be every other year. And I have to get somebody who's good in short course. I think American swimming would benefit, but I'm going to get down off my podium. You see any possibilities there?
Yeah, never will happen, but I will tell you, the long course, short course analysis. This is something that is definitely a hot topic because, if we just get right to it, the way we do rankings at SwimIntel for colleges is only off your short course times. Period, full stop. And this is why our rankings look very different than other ranking systems that are out there. But the reality is you will swim short course at conference championships. It is all that matters. So whether you like swimming in the bathtub or not, it is the reality, right? Now, USA Swimming and international events are all about long course. So people are like, but I got my long course is awesome. I should get recruited over that short course swimmer. No, you shouldn't, because that college coach is going to get hired and fired and promoted because of what happens in the short course, not in the long course. So it drives our recruits nuts because we don't use long course in rankings.
Well, let's talk Indiana football. Indiana football just spanked Alabama. Sorry, Alabama fans out there, 38-3. Come on. Alabama is chock full of 5-star and 4-star recruits. Now, I'm not making any judgments on how they rate 4 and 5 stars. I can see that, I know as a swimming coach that what you're doing is probably getting closer to real 4 and 5 stars. But still, Indiana clobbered them with a bunch of 2 and 3-star recruits, with a bunch of guys who were starting for, who transferred in from smaller schools you hadn't even heard of. And they totally crushed Alabama. Did that register with you in what you're doing? Did you look at that game and go, that's interesting?
Love that game, and I love the story behind Coach Signetti and his how he bet on himself and how he's recruited. And in football, you have programs that are by a player and you have developmental programs. And Georgia is more of a developmental program. I mean, they certainly definitely participate in the transfer portal. But you look at what Indiana has done is they have flipped the script on what is possible in college sports. And the reason why, and it should be obvious why I love this so much, why we grade out these college coaches based off improvement, is because we put a very, very, very high value on development. Very high value. Whether you're at the club level as an age group coach, 10 and unders, all the way through college, we love coaches that make you faster. And the reality is, it doesn't matter if you are coaching low-level D3, NAIA, JUCO, or you're at the top of the Power 4 heat. Great coaches develop talents at every single level. And that was Benji mentioned this earlier. One of the first things he told me, he was like, I bet Virginia has terrible development for their athletes. Wrong. They have phenomenal development for their athletes, right? Highest recruiting standards in the country, some of the best improvement in the country. That's why they keep winning NCAAs, right? It's brilliant coaching staff. And so I think that what happened at Indiana carries through all sports. It's identifying raw talent that you can develop. It's playing money ball, and it's actually being a coach, because being a coach is about development. It is not just about purchasing a player for a year. I have more respect for the developers than I have for the purchasers.
I'm not patting myself on the back, but I guess I am patting myself on the back. I remember seeing Ryan Lochte for the first time. He was at Fort Lauderdale Senior Nationals. He's probably 15, 16 years old. And it was that Sesame Street thing. And I'm kind of wondering if you can bring this into statistics, into what your analysis is. You looked in the pool, and I remember I wasn't looking at the heat sheet. I didn't know who the guy was. I knew his father was a coach, but I only knew that after the fact. I was watching the heat, and I was watching this one heat, and I was going, that person doesn't swim like all the others. It was immediately obvious. He had a bigger stroke. He had great touch for the water, and he wasn't all that good at that time. I mean, I wasn't superb. I'm sure he was very good at the level he was at, but it was kind of like going, wow. And yeah, I don't know if anybody's going so far as counting distance per stroke or anything like that, bringing that to statistics, but he really had a great flow. He had a great ride in the water. I know you're mostly dealing with time, but could you see like Jamie Bailey's bunch of people filming in the stands, figuring out how high they are in the water, doing their stroke counts and going, wow, this person is taking, because we all seen those people who, I mean, somebody said, oh, that person's really fast. And I turned to them and they said, that looks really easy. And I turned to them and said, that's because it is. And they're going, what do you mean? I said, it is easier for them. That's why they're able to be fast. They can devote, they're not making mistakes. They're not churning up the water. They're working with the water. They're flowing. Do you see that as a possible future about getting into even more statistics and making it even more meaningful?
Yes, I think there's a wonderful opportunity to bring more analytics and scouting like we do in places like football and baseball, where we have these anecdotal scouts that do their analog analysis of athletes. And we think swimming is all about times, but it's not all about times. It's just not. That's been the theme of this whole conversation for me. Coach Dorncott mentioned how he went to visit a swimmer that they were interested in named Maggie McNeil. It's like, we had to make a trip up to see this high school kiddo, Maggie McNeil. He said he watched her take her first turn and said, make that girl an offer right now. He said the way she hit the wall and turned, he said that was it. That's all he needed to see. He could tell that she moved differently in the water. And he said he didn't get her, but he knew she was going to be an absolute star. And she was. And I think we have coaches with an eye for talent. There are things that great coaches see that average coaches don't. And I think it's no different. Swimming is no different than football in that way. And we need more of that analysis, because if you can start to surface that, it becomes that Moneyball game of statistics with analysis and the analog with the binary. That is how you construct winning teams. And that plus, where you come from and where you're about to go to, is it going to mesh? That's what Indiana has done in their culture. They have figured out how to get the right players into the right system, and they were underrated to begin with, and now they're the favorites to win the national title.
So you're really looking at kind of a matrix of success for these athletes, the matrix being beginning at their college and then again moving forward as far as that. A story you told, John Urbanchek once came on deck, and it was before any of the older kids practiced, and Nova Pool had a lot of kids in it, and he was watching the pool for a moment. He just walked on deck and he pointed out and he said, who's that girl? And I told him who it was. He picked out an 11, 12-year-old who eventually went on to make the national team and was recruited highly and he just picked her out, 11, 12 years old. Just, who's that girl? And they were just swimming. So they do have, I think that some of those coaches do have that eye.
That's right.
And that's that extra thing.
This is what you're going to find with any business. There's always great ideas. They're everywhere. Everybody has an idea. Everybody has an opinion. But with any business, and that SwimIntel or any of the other businesses that I've been a part of or I've started, it's always about execution and then the taking theory to adoption. And so don't dismiss when I call Benji and I say, hey, I got this idea. I have this idea, but it's so risky to go off and execute that idea and then hope people adopt it. And so we released this concept of a LinkedIn-esque experience for a college swimming athlete. We released that in September of this year. And it was a huge risk because it was months of development. It was very hard stuff. And we did a lot of things that were different. And then you release it and you just keep your fingers crossed that you're going to get adoption. And I think the hard part is that just it's mentally taxing, just like having to swim 8,000 yards, 6 days a week, for 4 years. It gets mentally taxing when you take these chances and you try to create what I like to use the metaphor is you're creating a machine, you're building a machine. It doesn't exist yet, right? And so to create and architect that machine, there's a lot of risks. There's a lot of trial and error. There's a lot of gnashing of teeth and losing sleep at night. Are people going to adopt it? And that is the hard part, is persevering through the failures of starting things like SwimIntel, expanding it and hoping that, it works and it takes off. And I think, for my wife is going to kill me because, basically I spent
Two
now
times.
3 years. 3 years, this is my second company. I spent 3 years with no guaranteed salary, nothing, and so it was all to create, what I thought was going to be big. And I think it is going to be big. I think it is big. And I think now we have the foundation laid to where we can make swimming a lot more, a lot cooler, a lot more opportunities, so that nobody's going to come up to my son again and say, well, you swim, that's not a real sport. That's got to go. Like, that has got to go.
Well, one thing that you said earlier about the rules of the game, and I found it, I remember I used to think about this a lot. If you stuck a person on a tennis court who had played other sports and had never seen tennis, and you hit a ball over, the first instinct might have been to blast the ball over the fence and then to run around the tennis court and go home run. And then after a while, they might start looking and going, what's this line for? What's this line for? I mean, literally, the tennis court does not present itself as a series of obvious rules to an obvious game. And I think that's what you've done, is demystified the tennis court aspect of swimming. Now, you've got the alleys, you've got these lines that are all sorts of different places. And that's kind of what you seem to be doing to kind of
that. Yeah.
make people understand. Oh, you don't hit that home run and run out and go, yeah, I won.
Right. And like I said, the athletes are the stars, the coaches are the stars, and that has been and will continue to be our philosophy. And once people start to understand that, you're going to realize how awesome this sport is. And I really think that there's some great things on the horizon. And I think it's going to come from places like businesses that are outside the sport are going to come in, and they're going to make things like our meets better. They're going to make a lot of these things better. And there's so much opportunity in sports. The thing I hated the most that happened this year was Jason Kelsey's wife saying, there's one sport I will not let my kid play, that is swimming, because swim meets are terrible. Now, she was a swimmer. She appreciates that. And she's like, swim meets are awful. Swim meets do not have to be awful. They do not. That is a choice that has been made by people who have run swimming, who chose to make swim meets awful. And I can tell you, swim meets can be awesome if done right.
I have in my book, I offer a bunch of ideas. I think there should be betting. I think there should be drinks being served.
Absolutely.
I mean, you can really turn it into
the drunk
everything.
400 IM. That'd be wonderful.
Yeah, and of course, one of my great innovations too, that it will come up in an upcoming chapter, is if an official disqualifies a kid, he immediately has to get in and swim that event. No excuses, so they're going to really think about that 400 IM DQ, that 205. Oh, we're just letting them go. But yeah, I mean, I think that's a great point. I mean, we all kind of love this sport, and, it's been on. Benji, you have any closing thoughts here?
I'm really, I like the idea you guys have of the podcast, bringing in guests like Jamie. I think this is anything we can do to kind of help make this more exciting and really show the world what we have, what we know, which is what a great sport it is.
I really appreciate the opportunity just to talk and just riff with you all and tell you all about, my insights. And so I love the opportunity. I love what you guys are doing. And I thank you for having me on.
Ladies and gentlemen, that concludes our episode for today. Jamie, thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule to hop on this podcast. We greatly appreciate it, and I know our listeners did as well. We wish you the best of luck with everything, and if anyone wants to check out SwimIntel on social media, just type in SwimIntel and is the account with the blue check. Benji, thank you so much for hopping on as well. We greatly appreciate your time and wisdom. And for us, our Instagram is _currentconversations_. And if you'd like to read Jeff's new book, An Unsentimental Journey, you can find it on Substack. Thank you all so much for listening. We hope you'll tune in next week. See ya.